This is one of those cases that sinks its claws into you, a story so haunting, so cruel, it lingers in the back of your mind long after it ends. It was March 28, 2014. The world kept moving, but for one woman, everything was about to change. A day that started with routine ended in horror. Angela Rabat, a 26-year-old exotic dancer, had spent the night performing at a bachelor party in Atlanta. Hours later, she was gone, vanished without a trace. For days, there was nothing, no calls, no sightings, just silence. Until a survey crew stumbled upon a body in the woods. It was her. Who took her life, why, and how did a celebration turn into a nightmare? This is the horrifying case of Charles Outlaw. If you want more cases like this, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Angela Rabat was the kind of person who could walk into a room and instantly change the atmosphere. There was something about her, something warm, magnetic. Maybe it was the way she laughed, unguarded and full of life, or the way she could sense when someone was struggling and offer comfort without hesitation. She wasn't just a name on a missing persons flyer, not just another tragic story in the headlines. She was a daughter, a friend, a woman fighting for something bigger than herself. Born and raised in Georgia, Angela had always been independent. She knew early on that life wouldn't hand her anything for free, so she learned how to stand on her own 2 feet. But her world truly changed the moment she became a mother. When her daughter Sharon was born, Angela found a new purpose. Every decision she made, every sacrifice was for that little girl. No matter how chaotic life got, Angela made sure Sharon always felt safe and loved. Friends would often talk about how devoted she was as a mother. Even on her most exhausting nights, after long hours working in the clubs, she'd come home and stay up just to watch Sharon sleep. She'd whisper to her, promising that one day things would be different. One day they'd have a better life. Angela worked as an exotic dancer, a job that some judged, but one she never shied away from. It was a means to an end, a way to provide. She knew the industry wasn't forever, and she had plans to leave it behind. She dreamed of starting her own business, something stable that would give Sharon the kind of life she deserved. She had even taken steps toward that goal, saving what she could and talking about potential opportunities. People close to her saw her determination. She wasn't just dancing to survive. She was hustling, grinding, planning for a future where she wouldn't have to rely on unpredictable late nights and fast cash. There was a fire in her, a relentless drive. She wanted more, not just for herself, but for her daughter. Angela's relationships were complex, like anyone's. She had her fair share of struggles, especially when it came to trust, but those who truly knew her say she was loyal, almost to a fault. She loved deeply, and when she let someone in, she gave them everything. Sharon's father, Daryl Campbell, had seen both her strength and her vulnerability. They had their ups and downs, but one thing remained constant: Angela's devotion to their child. She would do anything for Sharon, and that alone commanded his respect. Despite the challenges, Angela never lost sight of who she was. She had an easy way of making people feel comfortable, a kindness that shone through even in the toughest moments. She wasn't perfect, but she was real, and that's what made her so unforgettable. But life, as it often does, had a way of pulling her in different directions. The demands of her job, the pressure of making ends meet, and the weight of her responsibilities sometimes left her drained. On the night of March 28, 2014, Angela made a decision that seemed harmless at the time. She left her daughter with a trusted friend planning to attend a bachelor party in Atlanta. It was just another job. One more night, one more paycheck. She had done this before. It wasn't out of the ordinary, but this time, something was different. Angela didn't know it yet, but she was walking into a night that would change everything. Angela stepped out into the cool night air, her heels clicking softly against the pavement as she pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The party had been loud, chaotic, like most of the ones she had worked before. Laughter had echoed off the walls, music pulsed through the floor, and bills had been tossed into the air like confetti. It was just another night in Atlanta's nightlife scene, just another job. But something about this night felt different. Maybe it was the exhaustion settling into her bones, or maybe it was the strange tension that had hung in the air as the party wound down. As the crowd thinned, Angela found herself standing alone, searching for a way home. Her phone buzzed in her hand as she scrolled through her contacts. It was late, too late to call just anyone. She needed someone she could count on, someone who would come without hesitation, and so she called Charles Outlaw. Charles wasn't a stranger. They had history, years of it. Whether it was friendship, something deeper, or something more complicated, one thing was certain: they knew each other well, maybe too well. The phone rang, and when he answered, something in Angela's voice shifted. Witnesses would later say she sounded frustrated, maybe even upset. There was an edge to her words, a sharpness that hinted at something unspoken. Was it impatience? An argument? No one knows for sure. But what is known is that Charles agreed to pick her up. She had a ride. As she waited, Angela stood beneath the streetlights, her shadow stretching long across the pavement. The city, still alive in the early morning hours, hummed around her. Cars passed, music spilled from passing windows, and the distant chatter of strangers filled the spaces between. She had no reason to feel unsafe. Atlanta was her city, the streets familiar, and yet something lingered in the air, a feeling she couldn't quite place. Minutes passed, then more. The waiting felt longer than it should have, and with every moment her frustration grew. When Charles finally pulled up, headlights washing over her, Angela exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She stepped toward the car, hesitated for the briefest of moments, and then opened the door. She got in. And then she was gone. No one at the party saw what happened next. No surveillance cameras caught the moment she disappeared into the night. The last trace of Angela Rabat was that phone call, that car, that ride she thought would take her home. But home was a place she would never return to. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting faint patterns on the walls. Somewhere in Atlanta, a child stirred in her sleep, unaware that the world around her had shifted overnight. Sharon's mother always called, always, but today the phone remained silent. Angela Rabat had never been the kind of person to just disappear. She was a mother before anything else, and no matter how busy or exhausted she was, she always made sure her daughter was safe. But now, there was no word from her. No check-in, no messages, just an empty space where her presence should have been. At first there was an attempt to brush it off. Maybe she had spent the night at a friend's house, maybe she had lost her phone or was too tired to reach out, but by late morning those flimsy explanations no longer held weight. Angela had responsibilities, her daughter, her friends, her job. She wouldn't just vanish. Darrell Campbell, Sharon's father, was the first to feel the cold, creeping dread settle in. He tried calling again and again, but each time the line went to voicemail. Something wasn't right. He reached out to their mutual friends, asking if anyone had seen her. The response was the same everywhere. No one knew where Angela was. He didn't hesitate. He got into his car and started retracing Angela's last steps. He knew she had been out that night. He knew she had gone to a party. And he knew she had needed a ride. That ride, it turned out, was with Charles Outlaw. Charles wasn't a stranger. He and Angela had known each other for years. There was history there, complicated history. When Darrell confronted him, demanding to know what had happened, Outlaw barely flinched. He claimed he had dropped Angela off somewhere else, not at the Steeplechase Apartments where others had seen her last. But his story didn't line up. The timelines were messy, the details inconsistent, the way he spoke, the way he deflected. It didn't sit right. Darrell wasn't the only one who noticed. Angela's friends had already started their own search, calling, texting, posting on social media. The worry spread like wildfire. Within hours, people across Atlanta were sharing her picture, pleading for information. By nightfall, the city knew her name. The next day, police were officially involved. The missing persons report was filed, but in those first crucial hours, answers remained elusive. Investigators combed through Angela's last known contacts, searching for leads. Witnesses confirmed she had been at Steeplechase around 6 in the morning, but beyond that, the details blurred. Where had she gone? Each passing day made the silence feel heavier. By the second day, Angela's name was plastered all over the internet. Friends and family organized search efforts, driving through neighborhoods, knocking on doors, desperate for any scrap of information. But the streets gave them nothing. Then came the rumors. Whispers spread about the last moments before Angela vanished. People talked, some out of concern, others for the thrill of speculation. But one thing was clear: the stories didn't match up. Some claimed she left willingly, others suggested something darker. Meanwhile, Outlaw remained calm. Too calm. He stuck to his story, repeating it with the same detached certainty. But those who knew Angela, those who knew how fiercely she loved her daughter, refused to accept his version of events. Days stretched into nights. Each moment without her felt like a slow, suffocating weight pressing down on those who loved her. Then, on the fifth day, everything changed. The search was about to come to an end. But not in the way anyone had hoped. The search was about to come to an end, but not in the way anyone had hoped. April 3 started like any other morning. A survey crew was working near Arcado Road and Lilburn Industrial Way, mapping out land for a future project. It was a quiet stretch of road, the kind people drove past without a second thought. Trees lined the area, thick and overgrown, shielding whatever lay beyond. It was the kind of place where secrets could be buried, where the world kept moving while something terrible lingered in the shadows. One of the crew members stepped off the road, his boots crunching against twigs and dry leaves. He was checking the land, making notes, when something caught his eye, a shape out of place, partially hidden by the brush. For a split second his mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just discarded clothing or a pile of trash. But then, the closer he looked, the less it made sense. His stomach twisted. The smell hit him first, a sharp, unmistakable stench of decay. And then, as he stepped closer, realization struck. A body. His breath caught in his throat as he stumbled back, his hands shaking as he reached for his phone. The call to 911 was quick, his words rushed and uneven. By the time officers arrived, the crew had backed away, their faces pale, their hands trembling. The body had been left there like an afterthought, dumped in the woods with no care, no dignity. It was Angela. News of the discovery spread fast, the shock wave reaching every corner of her community. Those who had held on to hope, who had prayed for her safe return, were left with a cruel reality. She had been there all along, abandoned in the dirt while the world kept spinning. Investigators quickly ruled her death a homicide. The cause? A gunshot wound. Someone had ended her life in the most brutal, final way. For Daryl, for Angela's mother, for the people who loved her, the confirmation shattered whatever strength they had left. The questions that had haunted them for days became unbearable. Who had done this? Why had they taken her away from her daughter, from the future she was building? And more importantly, where had she been in those lost hours between leaving the party and being left in the woods? The police worked fast, combing through evidence, retracing Angela's final steps. But the crime scene itself offered little. The wooded area wasn't where she had been killed, it was just where she had been discarded. Whoever had done this had wanted her to disappear, but they hadn't hidden her well enough. Attention turned to Charles Outlaw. He had been the last known person to see Angela. He had already claimed he'd dropped her off somewhere else, a story that never quite made sense. Now, with her body found, suspicion clung to him like a shadow. Interrogations were tense. Outlaw didn't break, didn't admit to anything, but his behavior, his timeline, it wasn't adding up. Investigators pressed him harder, digging into his past, his relationships, his potential motives. And then there was the question no one could shake. If Outlaw wasn't responsible, then who was? The answer was coming, but it wouldn't be what anyone expected. The answer was coming, but it wouldn't be what anyone expected. Investigators had been circling Charles Outlaw from the start, but now their focus tightened. His story had never fully added up. He claimed he had dropped Angela off, but no one could verify it. She hadn't called anyone, she hadn't texted. Her last known whereabouts placed her in his car. And after that, silence. But suspicions weren't enough. Detectives needed solid proof. They started combing through security footage, hoping to find a trace of Angela's movements after she left the party. What they found only deepened the mystery. There were no cameras that captured her being dropped off where Outlaw claimed. None of her usual contacts had seen or heard from her after she got into his car. It was as if she had vanished the moment she left the party. Then came the rental car. Outlaw had taken the vehicle to be meticulously cleaned the day after Angela disappeared. Not a casual wash, not just a quick vacuum, but a deep, professional detailing. Investigators knew that move well. It wasn't something an innocent man did. It was something someone did when they were trying to erase something that couldn't be left behind. The forensic team went to work. They secured the rental records, the cleaning logs, and every trace they could still recover from the vehicle. And while the cleaning had been thorough, it hadn't been perfect. Small, nearly invisible stains were found, ones that could only be confirmed with further testing. Then the phone records. Outlaw's alibi was weak, but his cell phone data was damning. Investigators traced his movements in the hours after Angela was last seen. His phone and Angela's phone had pinged off the same towers, traveling together. And then, the most chilling discovery, the signal placed both of them near the wooded area where Angela's body was later found. If he had simply dropped her off, why was his phone showing up there? Detectives pressed harder. They scoured through more records, checked for surveillance cameras in the areas he had driven through, and interviewed anyone who might have seen something. What they found only raised more red flags. Witnesses had spotted Outlaw acting strangely in the days following Angela's disappearance. Some said he seemed nervous, others recalled him avoiding conversations about her. A few mentioned that he had even asked around about what the police knew. And yet, Outlaw wasn't behind bars, not yet. Instead, authorities made a strategic move. They arrested him, but not for murder, not immediately. First, they charged him with unrelated drug offenses. It was a way to keep him in custody while they built their case, a way to make sure he didn't run, didn't destroy any more evidence, didn't have a chance to manipulate anyone into covering for him. Behind bars, Outlaw was running out of options. Detectives continued their relentless pursuit, interviewing those who knew both him and Angela, looking for any cracks in his story. It became clear that this wasn't just a random act of violence. There was history between them, there was tension, and now there was blood. As the case gained momentum, the pressure intensified. The forensic results came back. Traces of blood, too small for the cleaning crew to notice, were found inside the rental car. DNA testing confirmed what detectives had suspected. It was Angela's. That was the final piece they needed. Authorities moved forward with murder charges. Outlaw was now officially accused of malice murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. The weight of the evidence was suffocating. The phone records, the rental car, the inconsistencies in his statements, it all painted a picture too clear to ignore. But there were still unanswered questions. What had happened in those final moments between Angela and Outlaw? What had led to that bullet being fired? Was it premeditated, or had something escalated in the heat of the moment? And then an even more unsettling question arose. Was Outlaw truly the only person involved? The deeper police looked, the more tangled the case became. There were whispers of others who might have known something, people who had been silent, people who had yet to come forward. Angela's murder wasn't just a simple case of one man committing a crime. It was the beginning of a story far darker than anyone had imagined. The revelations surrounding Angela's murder had shaken the community. What seemed like a case of domestic violence had transformed into something far more insidious, layered in deception, cruelty, and a calculated effort to erase a life. But now, with Charles Outlaw behind bars, the battle for justice was only beginning. His arrest had been a victory, but it wasn't the final one. Angela's family, friends, and those who had fought tirelessly to bring her case into the light knew that real justice would only come when a jury heard the full truth and decided his fate. The courtroom became a battlefield. Prosecutors had spent months meticulously building their case, knowing that any misstep could cost them everything. Leading the charge for the state was Gwinnett County Assistant District Attorney Tracy Cason. She had seen her fair share of violent crimes, but Angela's case carried a different weight. A mother had been murdered, her body discarded like trash, and the man accused of doing it had shown no remorse. Cason knew she had to fight tooth and nail to ensure Angela's killer never walked free again. The defense, on the other hand, had one goal: create doubt. They painted Outlaw as a flawed man, certainly, but not a murderer. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that there was no eyewitness to the killing, no murder weapon recovered. They questioned the integrity of the phone records, the forensic evidence, and even Angela's own choices leading up to that night. It was a desperate strategy, but sometimes desperation was enough to sway a jury. The first trial began in August 2016, and tensions were high. Angela's family sat in the courtroom, listening as every gruesome detail was laid bare. The prosecution presented the forensic evidence, the traces of Angela's blood in Outlaw's rental car, the cell phone records placing them both at the scene of her death, the suspicious cleanup he had attempted in the days that followed. Witnesses described Angela's relationship with Outlaw. the turmoil leading up to her disappearance, the fear she had confided in those closest to her. Then the unthinkable happened, a mistrial. A critical mistake had been made, prejudicial information had been introduced that should never have reached the jury. It was enough to force the judge's hand. The case had to be tried all over again. For Angela's loved ones, it was a crushing blow. They had sat through weeks of testimony, endured the pain of reliving her murder, only to be told it wasn't over. But there was no choice but to move forward. They would do it all again if it meant justice would be served. Later that same month, the second trial began. This time there were no mistakes. Tracy Kaysen and her team delivered a case so airtight, so damning, that there could be no reasonable doubt. The jury listened as experts dissected the forensic evidence, as investigators detailed outlaw's lies, as Angela's family spoke of the void her death had left behind. And when the time came for a verdict, it didn't take long. Guilty. Charles Outlaw was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 15 years. There would be no more mistrials, no more delays. Justice had finally been served. In the courtroom, Angela's family wept, not just for the verdict, but for everything they had lost. Darrell Campbell, the father of Angela's daughter, had fought tirelessly to keep her story alive. He had stood in that courtroom, carrying the weight of their child's future on his shoulders. And though no amount of justice could bring Angela back, he had done what he had promised. He had ensured that her killer would never hurt another soul again. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked the family how they felt. There were no celebrations, no joy, only the bittersweet relief that came with knowing that Angela's name would not be forgotten, that the fight for justice had not been in vain. Angela had been a mother, a friend, a woman who deserved so much more than the fate that had been forced upon her. But now at least the man responsible would never walk free. This case reminds us that justice is not always swift, but it is necessary. It is a fight worth having, a battle worth waging, for those we've lost and those who still need protecting. And now, we want to hear from you. If you believe that no mother should have to lose her life at the hands of someone she trusted, subscribe to the channel. Only those who think violence against women should be ignored will scroll past. Let's make sure stories like Angela's are never forgotten.